Hello, everyone. Welcome back to a slightly delayed episode of Shouting into the Void. Liam was away the past weekend, as I'm sure some of you know, so we've had to record slightly later. But it is what it is. It's fine. Um, no one's really fussed. It's just another hour of free content you get, no matter when I decide to put it out. So it's fine. Yes, so this is the usual episode where we go through different episodes of Doctor Who, normally in chronological order. And we started with series one from 2005. And we're now on episode two of series three. So our TARDIS team is the Doctor, David Tennant, and Martha Jones on her first adventure, played by Freema Agyeman. I guess it's her first adventure, isn't it?
First proper one, yeah. Her first
Yeah.
trip in the TARDIS, if nothing else.
Yes. So yeah, I don't know how we want to compare this one to other ones. I guess this is kind of like the end of the world,
Mhm.
in terms of where the companion's at. Although this is obviously this is probably more Unquiet Dead than, than End of the
Yeah.
World. But yes, in this episode we see, well, I should say it's the Shakespeare Code, if you're following along, and we see that our TARDIS team arrive in Shakespearean London to meet Shakespeare. Um, and yeah, they have to stop witches because why not? I don't know when Shakespeare lines up with witchcraft and witch trials. I assume they're around the same time, but
Mm.
I'm not really a big buff on that type of history.
Yeah, I think they kind of go for that he was inspired by the witches in this to write Macbeth.
Right, of course, because if you haven't seen the episode, there's obviously a fair few Shakespeare references in this. Some will go over some people's heads, depends how much Shakespeare you know. I know quite a lot did when I was younger. Quite a lot in this episode went over my head when I was younger.
Mhm.
But I'm sure we'll come on to that.
Politics in my
Oh,
Doctor Who.
there's so much. There's too much. It's too much in this. But yeah, so what did you think of this? What did you think of sexy Shakespeare?
Sexy Shakespeare. Yeah, you know what? I really enjoyed it. I had fun with it.
Mhm,
It's not as good as I remember it being.
mhm.
Um, but that's my critical eye watching it back, thinking, "Wow, their plans
Yeah.
are awful." Like, what do they think was going to happen? So there's a lot of lapses in logic. There's a lot that I think is very, very underwritten in
Mhm.
regards to the carrier knights, how
Yeah.
they work, how they get around the whole words thing. Could have been a really cool idea. Don't think they went into it enough. Um, I think the main cast is good as ever, even if some characters
Mhm.
treat other characters very poorly.
Yeah.
But we can talk about that. And, the writer of the episode and a lot of the very, very obvious views they get across in this episode have
Yeah.
aged like milk.
Yeah.
So that doesn't help it for sure. But yeah, I still can have fun with it. I am a Shakespeare fan. I wrote a big ass essay on him in college and in uni. So I do like a lot of his stuff. So I enjoy the references, things like that. I think if you aren't that big on Shakespeare, you're certainly not going to get as much out of this one. So I'm like, haha, I see what you did there. So that I can still enjoy, and I like their interpretation of Shakespeare. I think it's very much like having Charles Dickens with the ghosts, having Shakespeare with witches. It makes sense. I think there's a logic to that I did get a kick out of, and I think practically they look quite cool. Others maybe not, but yeah, it's a fun episode, I think, for the most part, even if some things have not aged particularly well, whether plot or CG wise. But yeah, I have fun with it.
Uh, yeah.
I'm gonna say you enjoyed this significantly less than I did.
Yes. I think that's the case. I've never held strong opinions of this episode. I don't think. I think it was just another episode that was like, yeah, it's fine.
Mhm.
Sort of rewatching it, I kind of found myself a tiny bit bored at times.
Mhm.
A tiny bit kind of like, oh, come on, let's get going. I also don't think there was too much to write home about in terms of plot.
Yeah.
Um, Characters, obviously Shakespeare is the big one, and he's probably the standout. Maybe Lilith, the head witch, is also probably one standout. But outside of those two, all pretty forgettable. The support cast isn't there.
Yeah.
Um, it says a lot that I kind of struggled to get three positives for this.
I wonder if this is going to be like our biggest gap in scores ever.
Well, judging what you said, I think so. Because even when I was watching this, I was thinking, I don't. I think Liam's gonna like this more than I did.
So you messaged me about the opening scene, and I was like,
yeah,
"Oh no!"
Yeah, I know.
Because that opening scene traumatized me when I was a kid. I found that so scary.
It can be fun. We'll come on to all whatever my negatives are, but I just thought that it just wasn't. I don't think it didn't live up to the memory, I think, of how I remember it, which can be a detriment to some of the episodes. I'm probably surprised it's not really happened before. You know, with three seasons in, I'd have thought this would have happened sooner. And I'm kind of sad that it was this one, because I was like, oh, I did like it. And I remember liking it, but maybe there's a reason why I didn't watch it as much as Smith and Jones or Daleks in Manhattan or something like that. But yes, we'll come on to those negative reasons later. First of all, as always, we start with our positives. I do have exactly 3 this time, but you might have more. So we'll start.
No, I did narrow it down to 3. We're good.
Lovely. What is your first?
My first is the setting, because I'm a Shakespeare nerd. I really like that they managed to get permission to actually use the rebuilt Globe Theatre. So it's not actually accurate as it would have been in the day. But it's still, I think it was cool that they got to shoot it. I think they're only allowed to use it for like one night or something. It had to be night shoots. But I think they used that to the best of their ability. It looked fantastic. The costumes and everything I thought were brought to life really well. I think visually, Doctor Who's just very good at historicals. I think I found like they've realized the whole Elizabethan London thing really well. I thought I was watching some of the scenes of them like walking down the street and like, oh god, I can smell this and it smells awful, which I think is, you know, a very impressive feat for them to accomplish. It just, the visual style of London at that time with people throwing shit out the window. I mean, the witches and stuff probably isn't accurate to the time, granted, maybe, but that's the Doctor Who side of things, isn't it? But yeah, I like seeing, you know, the Globe Theatre and all of that. And I think it looked really, really cool. And I bought into the setting that the episode had going for it. Maybe not all the other aspects of the episode that I bought into necessarily, but I think it was really well grounded and a really cool contrast to, I think, you know, the last episode with a very clean hospital on a very clean moon, I guess. It feels barren moon. Yeah, let's go for that. And then we have like crowds and crowds of people, all like, locked into this space, and crowds and crowds of CG witches flying around in circles.
Definitely.
And yeah, just like a disgusting, messy looking place, because that was how it was at the time. I just really liked how they brought this setting to life. Yeah,
one of my positives is also the set design, more than anything. Just, you know, you could see in the as soon as they step out the TARDIS, you're like, oh yeah, this is definitely not 21st century England. You can get a feel for where they are, what time they are, and the way they sort of transform the Globe Theatre into, although to be fair, not much I don't think needs doing to transform it from what it currently actually looks like. I think they just basically put some hay on the floor. But other than that, you know, it looks pretty spot on. Shakespeare's like office, I guess, his room, you know, you can tell that's the writer's room with all of his sacks of papers and all that kind of stuff on his desk. The witch's house is also very well done with that massive cauldron in the middle and all the cobwebs over everything. And it all looks like it's the witch's house, which can be a little bit on the nose. And some people might think, oh, it's too, you know, campy, over the top, whatever. But that's what the witches are, I think, in this episode. Very over the top.
Shakespeare, they're literally just hubble bubble, toilet and trouble.
Yeah. Which is what this is, which is the point.
They kind of had to,
and so I just think that it looks great. It really does look great, and I think Doctor Who, especially in these first 4 series, has done very well with the historical side of set design. Unquiet Dead was very much the same. I'm pretty sure when we get to Fires of Pompeii, it's effectively the same walking tour that the Doctor does in this episode, but in Pompeii. But in all of them, you get the feel that you're actually back in time. And I think it's easier for them to do that because we know as an audience and as set designers that you know what you're expecting to see there. You know, there's actual costumes, you know what people wore, you know what life was like, so you can replicate it. Whereas going to the future and going to different planets, you have to do more to convince your audience that you're in a different place, which is why the historicals always seem to transport you easily rather than the futuristic ones. But yeah, I do agree that the set design was excellent throughout the whole episode. So what's your second?
Well, speaking of excellent, Dean Lennox Kelly as William Shakespeare.
He's mine as well.
Yay, best boy. I think from the outside, people will just see Shakespeare as, oh, forsooth, blah, 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 like Martha was all talking about. He's going to be this eccentric, over-the-top guy. I really like that Dean Lennox Kelly kind of brought this groundedness to him. There's some charm to him as well, but he just made him come across as like a normal guy for the most part, who obviously has the eye for the pretty lady, as we see excessively, and even the pretty man, if reasons are to be believed and rumors are to be believed, and what this episode makes a joke about as well. But yeah, I think to bring a sense of normality and a groundedness to Shakespeare when he's often perceived as anything but, I think is quite impressive. I thought he worked really well with the Doctor and Martha, like the trio of the three of them. I could have watched a lot more of that. I thought he kind of slotted in quite nicely to it. He brought something different. I liked his intelligence. He could see through the psychic paper like it was nothing, just that insight into his mind. And, he ended up kind of saving the day in the end because the Carrier Knights played themselves. And I just liked the little arc he kind of received in the episode. And we ended with him in a much better place, I think, with the future of his writing. He's like, oh, now I can write something to honor my boy. It felt like he didn't have the confidence in himself to maybe do his son justice by honoring him in a play beforehand. But when the Doctor kind of gave him all that confidence to save the world from the Carrier Knights, he's like, well, now maybe I can do something. And he's really kind of accepting his grief and pushing through that. So I like that he kind of delved into that a bit, but didn't portray him as like the perfect human being. As Martha mentions, you have a wife waiting for you somewhere and you're coming on to me and God knows how many other people. You're clearly not the greatest guy with that, poor Anne Hathaway. So they didn't kind of shy away from that as well and just make him like, oh, he's the greatest person in the history of the world. But he had one of the greatest minds, and that's what the episode was about. So I really liked how they did that. And I thought the actor did a really good job.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, it's a sexy Shakespeare. They could easily have gone down the route of a sort of old, bold man with the funny hair that is often associated with Shakespeare, which is or isn't the way he looked. Obviously, there's that whole theory that Shakespeare is actually 10 people and that they all came together or whatever. But in this one, he's neither. He's a young, I don't know, he seems very adventurous, sort of very like a scoundrel, like your typical sci-fi scoundrel. Yeah. And I think that comes across very well. It makes him more likable, I think, to the audience, makes him more accessible, because obviously this is a show that's kind of leaning toward children, so they're probably not going to have read a lot of Shakespeare. But it's also enough there to keep the parents interested, both in the references to Shakespeare and for him being, without being coy about it, an attractive man. So it's enough to keep everyone interested, no matter sort of what you prefer, whether you're into his work or if you're more on the looks side of things. I've forgotten the word, but there's definitely something there for everyone, and I think he definitely brings life to a role that could have turned out to be quite stale, I think.
The fact that he's a standout in an episode with cackling witches, like proper like visual effects to some of their makeup and stuff like that, is very impressive. And I do like how right from the off they do challenge like people, their expectations of what Shakespeare may have been like going into this episode, because even the Doctor has that view of Shakespeare. It's like, oh, he's got all these perfect words, blah blah, and he's like, shut your big fat mouths. I really like that introduction to him, so it was very well handled.
That, and then even from an acting standpoint, the way he can flip from between A, being conscious, to B, being possessed by Carrier Knights, to C, then being quite emotional. Like even just the way he sort of jolts up after he's knocked out. I was like, that's very good acting. Like that's unless they just reversed the shot, but I don't think they did. But and you could clearly see that he enjoyed the role. I'm kind of gutted that we haven't seen him come back in a cameo appearance since, because we've seen Charles Dickens come back in a very brief cameo. We've not yet seen Shakespeare, but looking at the guy's IMDb page, he's not really done much overall. So I think the last thing he was in was that Shadow and Bone series that's just come onto Netflix.
He was that in that actually. Yes,
He's only in a
he's very
couple
good
episodes.
Yeah.
So I think he's more or less having bit parts in episodes rather than big things. I think he's apparently in.
He voices an advert for beer as well. I can't remember what beer it is.
Maybe that's it. Maybe that's what's making him the money. Because it's probably not that one episode of Robin Hood he apparently appears in. So,
oh, really? Damn.
I think it's 1 or 2 episodes of Robin Hood he's in. It looked like he got around the BBC shows at the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think he's definitely, from this episode at least, an underrated actor that I'd like to see come back to the show. It's highly unlikely that'll happen. But yeah, enjoyed him all around. I think he was just a charismatic Shakespeare and something that you wouldn't have expected from an episode titled The Shakespeare Code. You know, especially with there is a current BBC sitcom with David Mitchell as Shakespeare where he's sort of that cliched balding man.
All right.
So it's good to see a different take on him, something that probably annoyed the Shakespeare. I mean, you could see him singing, but you know, I can imagine it probably would have annoyed some Shakespeare nerds at the time seeing him as a charming, attractive man. But
yeah, that is another thing I think with me enjoying the episode. I wanted the Shakespeare episode ever since the show came back, and I got one, and I was very excited about it. So maybe that colours things a bit, but I do like Shakespeare, so. Maybe. Come at me. Patrick Stewart reading the sonnets over the last lockdown was the best thing that's ever happened to me.
Thank God for a virus. Oh.
I mean, every cloud, okay? Every cloud was a Patrick Stewart.
Yeah, of course. So what is your final main positive?
The ending sequence with the goodbye to Shakespeare. I liked that whole scene. She's like, your breath stinks. And just the absolute chaos that ensues. When they set up earlier in the episode, like, oh, the Queen never shows up to these performances, then it's the most Doctor Who thing in the world in that it pays something off and sets something up. With Queen Elizabeth turning up at the end. And, you know, the Doctor hasn't met her yet, but she absolutely despises him, orders him to be killed. And then Shakespeare's just like laughing his head off as they all piss off running down the street into the TARDIS, arrow into the TARDIS door, which you see him removing gridlock. So I like how there's something about episodes tying into each other like that. They're very separate, but it feels like one long thing, which I kind of had to do in this anyway, because it's Martha's one and only trip.
That's her only trip.
One and only trip.
Yeah.
Definitely one and only trip. And I've been watching a lot of season 12, Tom Baker's first season, and every single story ties into the next one, like one long thing. So I'm quite enjoying that, and that's another reason why I'm excited for series 13 when that comes out, because it's probably going to do a similar kind of thing. But it's just fun. It's a bit chaotic kind of stuff to end the episode on, considering we watched a guy drown and get stabbed in the heart. We saw a woman get frightened to death. We saw a man get torn apart for wanting to bang a witch. So yeah, it was a fun kind of quirky ending, I think, now that Shakespeare kind of starts to work through his grief, I guess, and finds a new lease of life. So it's an upbeat, happy ending to you know, a muddled adventure perhaps, but I left it with the credits rolling and stuff. I was like, you know what, that was a good laugh. I liked how they ended that off. And then it's all, people being killed in cars, face of post back, next time trainers, cats. So yeah.
yeah, that's fair. See, your end sequence starts from where they're sat on the stage, not before when they stop the Carrionites. Then you're not including them. No.
I'm distinctly not including how they resolve the story.
Thought we better clarify that. That's fair. Yeah, that's understandable. I do like that. I was like, oh, man, that's a bit harsh, but I guess the only way to sort of tell him to back off is to piss him off, I guess, or at least, you know, definitely say you're not interested.
Yeah, maybe don't cheat on your wife, buddy. You know,
maybe not. But hey, it is Elizabethan England, anything goes. So, yeah, I did like the kind of flirtatious romance that Shakespeare and Martha had throughout. I guess he's more, you know, she's not necessarily receptive to it, but I like the fact that he just kept trying. Like, there's a number of moments where like the man's just died of drowning and they come back up, and then Shakespeare's like, hey, you're attractive. It's like, well, hang on a second.
He's like, wow, this tree is terrible, tell me about Fredonia.
And then they do it later as well when they go into I think to see the architect like, hey, tell me about Shakespeare. There's a time and a place. Come on.
Please.
So I did like that aspect of the humor and that aspect of the relationship. And I think they basically ended it the only way they could. You couldn't have Martha dating Shakespeare. So
I mean, you could, but I'd advise
I
against.
mean, yeah.
But I mean, with lines like "Your effect is special indeed," how did it not happen?
No, exactly. That's fair enough. Speaking of Martha and relationships, my last positive is, for the most part, the relationship between the Doctor and Martha and how they interact with each other. I say for the most part because this will also lead on to my negatives.
I'm going to bounce it out. Don't worry.
So throughout the most of the episode, I do like that the Doctor's treating this very much, obviously, as a one trip, but he's like giving the grand tour, the answering all the cliche questions, showing off effectively. I like how Martha's like, hey, we could just go and record this and then take it back. And then they sort of laugh it off as like a joke. And that's one of two Back to the Future references in this episode. And yeah, I just think that, and even he needs Martha's help to come back alive, to get his other heart started. Despite earlier on being like, oh, you're not good enough kind of thing. He relies on her twice, or at least I think in the Globe, she says something and he's like, oh, that's great, thanks. Which is like the scene directly after they've had the talk. And then, yeah, he relies on her to restart one of his hearts as soon as he's been got by the Carrionite. And I just think that, and she provides the special word to, I'm not going to yell it because it's cringe. But the special word that successfully gets rid of the Carrionites. So I think that she holds her own in this episode, and I do like most of the interactions with her and the Doctor, and I think it does set up how their relationship progresses moving throughout the season. But saying that, and we'll skip into the negatives now. The negative from this is the looming shadow of Rose and the Doctor's somewhat harsh snap.
Somewhat.
Very harsh snap at Martha. Very unnecessary snap at Martha when they're getting ready for bed opposite Shakespeare. I assume it's one of your negatives.
It is.
It's strange because, and you messaged me at the time saying Rose wouldn't have known what to do, because she wouldn't have known what to do. Like, if the Doctor didn't know, how are you going to know? And it's not like it was staring him in the face. It was the Globe Theatre, which you were in once, which is what helped you figure it out. Until you went back there thanks for talking to Shakespeare after a man had died. You know, there was no way you'd have figured that out without the death of that man. So it's just a bit, I don't know what's made, you know, I don't know whether that's a Russell inserted moment so that he has to have that bit of angst over Rose, because it feels very out of place with how he's acted so far in the episode.
Yeah.
And then it kind of, the Rose impact works with the Carrionite, you know, when they confront each other. I think that's a fine moment.
Yeah, I don't mind that one.
That is the case. You know, if he would be annoyed at that. But it's this one that just feels very jarring and out of place for me.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're the same.
Yeah. Well, this was my third negative, but I've put the Doctor's treatment of Martha and their kind of interactions.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, I don't mind the Rose mention when Lilith brings up the name, because I thought that's well set up with the whole name thing anyway. I thought, that makes sense. And the fact that she wouldn't be able to find out what his real name was, I like that. That was cool. But the other one, Rose would know. Oh, poor me. I'm separate. Yeah. She's alive. Get over it. And it's like, well, don't worry. I'll take you home tomorrow. Like every 5 minutes, he's like, this is one last trip. I'm taking you home. This isn't going to last. And I'm like, yes, we get it. And when he's like, we can't scare them and let them believe it was witchcraft. Then she's like, what is it? He's like, witchcraft, which is a great moment. Yeah. In the very next scene, she's like, oh, so witchcraft is real then? And he's like, don't be stupid, Master. It's not
you
witchcraft.
fucking idiot.
What are you talking about? You told her it was witchcraft.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my goodness. And then when he's like, just lying in bed, he's like, are you going to stand all night then? A woman can do what she wants. She's probably feeling very awkward about this situation.
Well, she is. You can see that. And it's very... And I get the doctor's... I was going to say the doctor's not supposed to see sexual relationships, but he obviously did with Rose. But I guess there's that naivety to him that he can't see when someone's interested. Obviously, that relationship with Rose built up over 2 seasons. Who knows how long that was in real time. But maybe he just can't see that flirtatious side.
Yeah, I think the point is that he's completely oblivious to her feelings.
Yeah.
But, you know,
it's funny though.
But they go far too into it. And of course, when Jodie's oblivious to her companion's feelings, then it's just bad and terrible.
Obviously.
But yeah, and even when she like restarts his heart, he's like, oh, good. What are you just standing there for? Come on. Like, 2 seconds ago, she just restarted your heart, pal. Like, give her a fucking chance. There's just a few things like that. I'm like, please. But I will say that was my third of the 3 negatives. So it was annoying, but I can get over it. Because I think from here, it does get worse sometimes. But I feel like it's better in the next one because it's not necessarily about Rose. It's just his whole past that he refuses to tell her anything about. But yeah, there was just some moments I was like, my God, man, get it together. Yeah,
that's fair enough. So my sort of next one, because that was my top worst, just because I just don't like the scene. Not necessarily the Carrie Knight's plan, because I kind of get their plan. They need the best wordsmiths to come up with effectively the key to unlocking the door to their realm, which is fair enough, and it makes sense. But when Shakespeare's there putting them back in, we know there is a voodoo doll with Shakespeare's hair on it. Why don't they use it? They used it to knock him out the first time, and she just goes, ugh. She doesn't just flick him or that. She proper poke punches it away. I'm like, surely it's just on the floor. Just pick it back up and do it again. What are they going to do? So that, the resolution, I think that resolution annoyed me more than most. I can put most of the plot holes down to it just being witchcraft. That's how they can see the doctor through Peter Street's eyes. That's how they can monitor all these things. They've got potions that, I can put all that down to it just being science we don't understand and all that kind of stuff. But when there's clearly a way they can stop the good guys, and there's no explanation as to why that can't happen when it's literally done 2 minutes ago, I think that's a massive plot hole that no amount of, but it fell there under the floorboards or something. There's nothing you could do. Maybe if maybe there was a scene of where they had one of the background actors say, go up there and get the doll off them, and you just see a hand come through and grab the doll and whatever. That would have made more sense, because then you could say, wow, they didn't have the doll. But as far as you can tell, it's still there, if on the floor, and there's no reason why Shakespeare should have won. It doesn't make sense. And that kind of puts a dampener, I think, on the whole episode, because if the resolution to the episode isn't good, then what are you waiting for, basically? What are you watching the whole thing for if it's just it's done? And then there is another issue I have with the finale, but that's more a case of the context behind that's aged poorly, not necessarily the actual aspect. But that's the
turf in the room, if you will.
yes. So what is your next negative, or your top one, I guess?
This was my top one. It was the Carriadites' kind of very muddly plan, and their power set, I feel like, was a bit inconsistent. Because sometimes they needed the dolls to do shit. Sometimes they could just go, and I've possessed you now. Sometimes they had powder coming out of their fingers as they were doing some work. Sometimes they didn't have that. Sometimes she needed the broom to fly away. Then she just flies out the window and floats.
She says it helps her make a speedy escape, or it helps.
She said it helps aid her flight, but then she just flies without it anyway.
Yeah. So maybe
it doesn't really aid that much if you can just do it. Then does it, Lilith? Stupid Lilith.
You bitch, Lilith.
You stupid bitch. And yet there's just some random thing they just killed that guy at the start because they did.
Good. Yep.
Poor guy. Which I guess is fine. Why even bother keeping Street alive when you just kill everyone else when they're getting away? Like him chanting witches and stuff. If any, at worst, people are going to listen to him and be like, "Oh, that's a bit weird." You might as well just make sure that doesn't happen, and there aren't any rumors of witches anywhere.
Too late.
Yeah, and they just do it half an hour into a 45-minute episode.
Yeah.
After he's been in there for like a year or whatever it was. So there was everything with that. The fact that they had this theatre built to use Shakespeare's words to release all their sisters or whatever it was, and then they're surprised when Shakespeare uses the theatre they built that makes his words more powerful to trap them all again. And they're just still like, no, we've lost, no, doing nothing about it. All they could do is just scream, like, you absolutely played yourselves. It's just a few things like that, and how and when they use Shakespeare is very like specific. Like, okay, we need him to be unconscious so we can make him write this, where we could just write the words ourselves at this point. Oh, he's shown up now, let's just knock him unconscious. Okay, fine. It was like they just needed him in certain situations and didn't like it. It relied on a lot of kind of crazy stuff, and it's very muddled exactly like how they needed to use Shakespeare to do what. And I don't think they did enough to explain properly like the power of the words and stuff. I think there was something cool in there. I just don't think they properly got into it enough. It was like a throwaway line, really.
Especially, math. That was it.
It's like math, but with words. I'm like, but it's not though, is it? Because maths and English are two very different things. So yes, there was a lot of muddling, I think, in how their powers are executed on screen, and that was my biggest kind of thing.
At this point, I would say in the target novelization we'll get. However, because of the writer of this episode, I don't think we'll get a target novelization anytime soon.
Or they'll get someone else.
I know, but either way.
But even then,
have
with the whole
to him,
good old JK ending, they probably won't bother.
So I doubt we'll get one.
Good old Dickens.
Just change it. Just change it.
Just change the writer.
But I mean, if that was to be a case, I imagine we'd have got more explanation of why they had to do it at this particular time, why it was this play, why wait until Shakespeare's done another play, why not put it into that play? Maybe we'd find out that the boy that was serenading Lilith was like one of the servants at Shakespeare's office. So Lilith, they killed him so that Lilith could go there.
I bet he was a serial killer.
Probably he was probably going to go in and kill her. That's what it was all for, and then they had to kill him. But I think if there was that route for them to do more and explain more, I think they will in a book if they did it. This felt very much like they focused on the wrong things when it came to 45 minutes. Like Shakespeare constantly flirting with Martha every time he gets, like Doctor reminding Martha that it's one trip, like the Doctor snapping at Rose. Sometimes there can be good character beats, but I'd rather those go and we get more Carrie Knight backstory, and reasoning more than anything. I mean, it might be in there. They might say something about, hey, there's a certain alignment of the stars that's happening now that means we need to do this.
I want to know why Blood Tide and Doomfinger don't have pretty faces too. Tell me, give me the backstory.
They don't need to. They're not the actors that are paying more.
They're not the main actress. No,
exactly. I do agree that there is a bit of inconsistency with the Carrie Knights and their plot. But hey, at least they make for a cool cameo in like series 6 or whatever when the ball comes out of the suitcase that Matt's in.
Unicorn and the Wasp.
Oh, is it? Okay, there you go. Then.
Yeah. It's when he's roughing. He's going through the.
He's looking for the book, isn't he?
The book, yeah.
Yeah, I remember.
See for Cyberman, and I think you can hear them scream.
Yeah, you can.
They're just constantly screaming.
But yeah, so that my next negative, and like I said, I had a fair few, is the other issue with the finale, and this is one that is contextual now rather than an issue with the episode, so it's kind of unfair. Obviously, there's been a load of shit said by J.K. Rowling over the past 2-3 years now, which has made her a very unpopular figure in most corners of the, well, not of the world, of the pop culture world, I guess, is the correct term. And obviously, she's completely wrong in her thoughts. But also, what is strange and very coincidental about this is she obviously shares the same thoughts as the writer of this episode. So I don't know how. It's just very coincidental that she's used as an example of a good writer in another one. And I'm again, if this hadn't come out, if we were reviewing this 5 years ago, we'd probably say, "Oh, that's funny." But that's time for you. Things change.
Yeah.
I like.
Thank
the
God
reference...
it didn't work out when they wanted to do a special with her in it.
I know.
Thank God.
That would have been that episode would just nobody would watch it. It would get review bombed to hell now.
It would be deleted from canon.
Yeah. And then
like everything is.
Yeah, nothing's canon.
Exactly.
Nothing is canon and everything is canon.
This episode alone goes against canon, as we will find out in my fun facts.
Of course. I don't mind the reference to book 7 because this time I don't think the 7th book had come out.
No,
so I kind of like how that lines up quite well.
I think it came out later that year, I think. So
yeah, it must have been soon. So that's fine. I don't mind that, but it is in the scene where Ten's being a dick to Martha, so whatever. Yeah, and just the use of Expelliarmus. Surely they must have had to pay J.K. Rowling something to use that. I don't know.
Oh, I hope not.
It feels very much like she would have sued if she didn't know. But then again, it's promoting her work and promoting her book, so maybe it's like a freebie. But yeah, it just feels... I get it, but it feels very forced and set up, and maybe it was just thrown in there because, hey, what's a popular writer of the time now? J.K. Rowling. We'll
Good old J.K.
Yeah. So, for example, if that was done now, it could be David Williams as one. If you're aiming at the kids, it could be Richard Osman if you're aiming more as an adult. It could be Dan Brown. I don't know if he's still relevant anymore. But, it's more because of the context it's in now, and because watching it now, knowing what we know, it changed things. Similar to Mickey last season. It can be... That's what happens. It shouldn't happen,
I'd want it to be Tom Fletcher from McFly.
Yeah.
So they can just quote dinosaur that pooped a planet to defeat the Carriers.
Oh, could you imagine? I wish. But yeah, I think it's unfair to blame the episode for this. However, the guy that wrote the episode is also a big dick. So
yeah, I highly doubt it's probably a coincidence.
Yeah. So, it's not... Although I might feel like I'm being harsh because of if it was somebody else who wrote it, if this was a Russell episode, I might be like, it's unfortunate that it's in there. But given the people involved, I
feel like it's too much of a coincidence to ignore when it comes to this particular thing.
Yeah, which is a shame, but it's all right. It never gets mentioned again. I don't know how many more episodes Gareth Roberts has done. A couple, I think.
I mean, he definitely did some for Capaldi, so we're going to be...
yeah. And he also did Attack of the Grask.
He did, yeah.
Don't forget that one.
Oh, dear.
But yes, so your second, is it now?
This is technically my third, because we talked about the Dr. Martha and the Carrie Knight's plan. So my last one is there were a few kind of dodgy visual effects, I think, that kind of took me out of it a bit. Some of the wide shots of like the smoke and stuff, I was like, But the main one was the Carrie Knight's trapped in the ball.
Really? That one? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't necessarily look bad.
They don't really fit into the circle.
No, it's like a weird. They tried to like curve it around the ball, but I just don't think it looks particularly good. No. And
it's like a flat picture on a curved surface.
Just the imagery alone of them inside it, it's just a bit weird and cheesy. And I feel like the green they used for like the image doesn't blend into the ball very well, so it just looks like they've copy and pasted that image on,
which they have done.
Which they have to save money. And yeah, it was a step too far with that solution. It was just a bit silly to be like, and it was very strange, especially because we'd already seen what it looked like inside, and there wasn't any green filters of them spinning around all the things, and then it's just the three of them. Yeah, it was an odd one, and I was like, that's silly. But
yeah, the CGI is also my third negative. Especially the Carrie Knight design looks great. It looks great when it's written on Battles in Time card. It looks great when it's in a book. does not look good when it's moving in CGI.
No.
But again, that's more because of the CGI of the time, I think, more than now. I mean, I'm not expecting them to make 30 Carrie Knight puppets, but that's probably why the Carrie Knights as a Carrie Knight are only in there as little as possible, and why they've got because the makeup looks great, as it always does. Whenever it's practical makeup, it always looks good. And this is another example of that. But just the CGI of the Carrie Knights is great. And yeah, when they're like, oh, it's the globe, and they look, and it's another of those green screen issues that we had in the previous episode, where you can tell the aerial shots are fine. It's dark, so it hides most of the issues. But yeah, it's another issue of 2007 CGI. You can't do much unless you're Pirates of the Caribbean with Davy Jones.
Davy Jones still looking incredible from 2006.
That is the peak of CGI right there in 2006.
Yeah, it will never get better than that.
That and the opening shot of Revenge of the Sith, I think, which came out in 2005 when they fly over the space battle. That looks incredible. And how that still looks incredible, 16 years on is madness. But that's Disney and Lucasfilm, which have multi-million-dollar budgets.
Which own the world now.
Yeah. Doctor Who has a budget of £10. So
Yes.
it's just one guy on a laptop going, oh, I've got to put it in and destroy it. But we joke, but it's probably true. But yeah, the CGI isn't great, but again, it's a product of its time more than anything. In terms of my sort of other things, I don't know why Lilith is in like a fancy clothes at the first theatre, because then
she could do what she needs to do just as easily, just being in the crowd.
Yeah.
If anything, she's less likely to be spotted in the big crowd than someone probably looking at being like, what is she doing?
Yeah. And then even so, she'd be like, why is my servant dressed as a nice
Hang on.
up there? I know that one. But then it's like, even so, she comes back later, still dressed in the witch's garb and everything. So
yeah,
it feels unnecessary for her to have so many disguises. Especially because it probably would have cost more money to go and sit in the nice balcony area. So that's just a bit of a strange thing, which again, if there was a novelization, there might be a reason behind, but it's fine. I also thought there was a slight mixed tone in the final act. People were dying, there was a threat, and then there was just some jokes being thrown around. I can't remember it specifically, but the jokes about Doctor only having one heart working, like when Martha's like, oh my god, are you okay? And he's on the floor, she's like, oh, 2 hearts, and then he just wakes up. I'm like, so was he pretending to be dead for comedic effect?
Like, it just seems strange. You're just letting her believe that you're like dying again.
So there's that.
You're not doing that for anyone. Let us go on, mate.
Yeah, exactly. And then when they're outside, they're like, which house is it? And then the door opens and he goes, which house? I'm like, for fuck's sake. It's just, there was quite a lot of jokes, and sometimes it can work, but it just felt like they were another one where they're running out on a time, and they're going, and they run one way, and Martha goes, you're going the wrong way, and then they
we're not, Martha,
the wrong way, and then basically, and it's like, that's another, you don't need that bit, just have them run out. And
they just did a very similar thing in Army of Ghosts, which
that's it
4 episodes ago.
I know, and so there's little bits like that where I thought it could have been fine-tuned slightly. But again, it's a family show. You kind of need those quips and one-liners, which is fine. Also, this episode is like, I think one episode in series 1, very horny. There's a lot of adult jokes, I guess. Obviously, especially around Shakespeare and his pub landlady, who apparently sleeps with him, I guess, is what we're supposed to get from that.
Not anymore.
No, definitely not. And it's just a bit, even in the first scene, there's the whole will you come in type thing, and it's like,
will you enter, sir?
I
will.
So it's no, just,
you bloody won't.
And again, I think it's the guy that it's the writer, I think, that's the problem there more than the characters, but it's the writer.
Wait.
I know. And then obviously
I've got a fun fact for you about that whole situation.
And then not even that, and then speaking of the writer, there's the whole bit where the doctor's like, oh, it's PC gone mad about what Shakespeare should or shouldn't call Martha. And I'm like, you don't need to make a big fuss out of this. you can easily get away with not having that, especially with someone like Shakespeare, who's clearly open to everything, judging by the fact that he already knows by the end of the episode that Martha's from the future and the Doctor's from a different planet, and he just doesn't blink an eye.
Yeah.
You don't have to have him be like someone it's sunk very much of a man being like, oh, I don't know what to say anymore, you can't say anything type of thing, which is what the writer is.
And stop giving those lines to the Doctor.
yeah, exactly. And like it can work. And at the time, and even as recently as a few years ago when I watched it, I was like, oh, that's funny. Yeah, I get it. But it just doesn't feel right. But again, it was 2007 when this was written. A PC gone mad wasn't exactly like a thing that would be yelled by sexists and racists on an almost constant basis at that point, because there was still sexism, racism around, and it wasn't being addressed as much as it is now. Therefore, people didn't call it out and say it. But yeah, it's. I think so. I guess my biggest negative for this is the writer,
basically,
which is fair enough because I think he's a bit of a dick. So I'm not sorry about that. So have you got any other positives or negatives you want to tack on?
I did enjoy the music. I can't remember what point it was at. But I was like, I'm really liking this music in the background, and I don't talk about music enough, I think, when it comes to Doctor Who. So it was good in this one. Well done, Murray.
I think this one does have a nice similar like to the set design. You feel like this is music that is in that era, with the different types of instruments used and the different type of tune. I do agree that while I thought it was a bit overbearing in the finale, I think it was quite loud and dramatic and a bit too much. I do agree that
don't look too closely at it. Don't look too closely at it. Listen to the music.
Yeah, listen. Just it's too loud. You close your eyes, you can't hear it. But yeah, I do think that there are good moments in this one for where it comes to music, which, as always, Murray Gold is great at scoring the show. Which is fair enough. That's why he's hired, and that's why he had the job for like 15 years or whatever it was.
Yeah. And credits to the actress who played Bloodtide Doomfinger for just camping it up.
Yeah. Excellent.
I bet they had a lot of fun with that.
Well, I mean, if you're gonna have to sit in a makeup chair for like 10 hours, you might as well go all out.
Just the opening scene with the light on the scene, like the Grinch in the How the Grinch Stole Christmas.
For the Bloodtide. Whoa. There's no need to be up there.
The tide of blood. Oh, so good.
Yeah, I do agree. That was and then even when like it's like I name you Karen, like
he knows us.
It's like she just ran all the way home.
Her power stopped working. She's just running all the way home, crying in the street. And when they don't even care about being seen by the finale because they're both just in the booth, like
not even like dressed fancy, like they should be.
They're just there.
Oh
dear.
Yeah, it's fair enough. I mean, if I had to sit through a makeup chair, I definitely would make sure my performance was memorable.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Take me into the fun facts. What have we got?
Oh, I will indeed. Right.
Hopefully they're fun.
Some of them are very fun. Some of them are very uncomfortable. Okay. So this is the second appearance of a famous writer in the Rusty Davies era after Charles Dickens in Series 1. The third time this occurs is next season with Agatha Christie in The Unicorn and the Wasp. So Rusty Davies likes famous writers, and fair enough. The working titles for this episode were Theatre of Doom.
I don't mind that one.
Which was revealed in David Tennant's video diary behind the scenes of Series 3. But even at that time, he was like, this is a working title, we're going to change it. And the other one's simple enough, Love's Labour's one. Fair. Fredonia is actually a fictional country from the film Duck Soup. So hopefully that's not terrible and transphobic or whatever, because I haven't heard of it. But it's Gareth Roberts. Shakespeare did indeed use the term Sycorax in The Tempest, so that's how he kind of gets it.
I remember that. I remember seeing
nod,
I remember seeing that in The Tempest, being like, oh, that was in Doctor Who. Be like, which helps again.
Oh my god,
kids,
Shakespeare copy Doctor Who.
Yeah, and it helps kids be like, oh my god, so Doctor Who's real, because they get whatever. I do remember that. It's vivid memory.
Indeed. Shakespeare refers to Martha as the Dark Lady near the end of the episode, which is the mysterious subject of many of his sonnets. So it's Martha, folks. Mystery solved. This story plays on the real life speculation about Love's Labour's One. It's possible lost play, or some people think it's just an alternate title to another play, like 12th Night or something, which I kind of subscribe to. The scene where the Doctor and Martha share a room originally had the Doctor undressing to his underwear before inviting Martha to share the bed. It was rewritten when producers and David Tennant thought it was inappropriate. I agree.
And I was just reading the Clockwise Man, and even in that, like, Rose and the Doctor have separate rooms, and it is very much implied that the Doctor does not sleep. He will just, and it's shown in this where he's already wide-eyed and awake when the woman screams. So it's kind of unnecessary for the Doctor even to be in the bed. He can just say, you have the bed, I'm going to go for a walk or something like that. And
again, the fact that the producers and Tennant were like, no, that's inappropriate. I think it's the writer, guys. It's the writer. It's when you're like, this is a horny episode, I was like, it could have been hornier. Can you imagine the fangirls if they'd actually done that scene? Good God. So the ending with Queen Elizabeth was Rusty Davies' idea. That's probably why it was one of my favorite scenes of the episode. The villains were proposed to either be based on the witches from Macbeth or the fairies from A Midsummer Night's Dream, but the witches were chosen because they were felt to be a more iconic kind of creature, which I think is fair. Peter Street's death was originally going to be much more complex, with him being sucked down into his bed. I'm assuming is maybe a reference to Johnny Depp's death in Nightmare on Elm Street, maybe. But that would have been interesting, but also that had the potential to be quite silly as well. In earlier stages of development, Shakespeare's daughter Susanna was going to appear in the episode, but they got rid of her because, I don't know.
Can't have a romance with Martha with a door in the way.
That's true. Not now, daughter. The 57 academics just punched the air line that the Doctor makes after Shakespeare flirts with him is a reference to Sonnet 57, which a lot of people believe is one of many sonnets written for a man, because rumor has it the Doctor previously claimed to have met Shakespeare in the Fourth Doctor story City of Death. Lines were written in the script to reference this, but were cut to avoid confusing new viewers of Doctor Who. So again, canon means nothing.
I mean, but then you could always have the Doctor met this one first, and then Shakespeare then met the Fourth Doctor after meeting the 10th. You know, there's always
exactly.
A way around.
It doesn't matter. It means nothing. It means absolutely nothing. So, time as children, people, calm down. There are multiple Harry Potter references in this story. By this point, David Tennant had appeared in Goblet of Fire, and we know the mess surrounding JK. So that's the uncomfortable fact for you. And David Tennant would later star in the Royal Shakespeare Company's production of Hamlet, during which he announced his departure from Doctor Who in an interval during the National Television Awards.
I remember that.
Sad times for all. The Doctor telling Shakespeare to stop rubbing where he hit his head or he'd go bald references most portraits of Shakespeare being of a balding man. Same with the thing, his neck brace and stuff.
That I was like, that one as well was another inappropriately timed joke, because they need to go and stop the witches, and he's used that moment to tell a bold joke. I'm like, come on.
Yeah, people are dying. Also, shout out to the guy who's like, I told thee so. I told thee. When they mentioned global warming earlier, but there are no politics in Doctor Who, so I won't talk about it.
Definitely not.
And then finally, this is one of few occasions where the Doctor doesn't use a sonic screwdriver during the episode.
I hadn't even noticed.
There you go. Because
I did. I think this is probably one of the few episodes we actually see the Doctor piloting the TARDIS as well. At the start, which is I quite enjoyed. I like the fact that you sort of see him, working the console. Normally, it's just we're here, doors are open, let's go. But in this one, there's more of a transition, which I quite like.
Yeah, Martha's like asking questions about the console stuff. He's like, it doesn't matter anyway, because you're not going to be here for very long, Martha.
yeah.
Shut up, it's more fun if you don't think about it, Martha.
Shut up. This is your one trip. Shut up. Definitely not getting two more after this. Is it two? This is Gridlock, and then it's the Dalek two-part in it, or is it?
Because he's like, well, you've been to the past, we might as well go to the future.
And that's it.
And then Daleks in the Hand, they just turn up and don't mention why they're there.
Whoopsie.
It just happens.
Fair enough. But it's fine, because the episode when they do go home is bad. So
those are our fun, comfortable facts, if you will.
Yes. So that leaves one thing, rating out of 10. What are you giving it?
I want to hear what yours is first.
Oh, I'm giving a 5.5.
Okay, that's not as bad as I thought.
Oh, okay then. I thought you.
That's not too
I
bad.
thought it was bad, worse than you thought. I was like, oh, 6. No, straight away.
I mean,
it's not
that's
even
above average.
Yeah, it's not even
That's
like a 5.5, or there's only one number written there and it's 5.5. So I
Yeah.
straight away it was like I knew that, yeah, not great.
Yeah.
Even like in the context of our other ones, that came into my mind after I wrote the number down, but I was like, I don't care. This is 5.5.
Yeah.
So what have you given it?
I gave it a 7. I think it's
fair enough.
solid, good time, but
Yeah.
I didn't enjoy it as much as Smith and Jones. I think it's definitely the superior episode. So yeah.
Yeah. So we're currently 50% on the episodes. So
well,
but it's fine. Not every episode's for everyone. As we've said, there are certain episodes, there are certain things in this that I did like, obviously. It's not this was terrible, I hate everything. That will come with Kill the Moon in a few years' time. But yeah, I think that's it for Shakespeare Code. And up next is Gridlock. This is where we see Martha continue her one trip to New York, back at the scene of Cassandra's crime from last season, except this time we're in the city. And where is everyone? And why are these people trying to sell me drugs?
Happy.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, it's just I say more of the same. It's a futuristic city. It's basically a dystopia. People are trapped in their cars on the motorway. What do you remember of the episode?
Next to nothing. I remember the macro there for reasons.
Yeah,
and
crab, big crab boy.
Face a bow, big secret. That's kind of all I really remember. And cat people, and lesbian old ladies, and
no, they're sisters.
Oh, and Martha gets kidnapped, and shenanigans and crabs and basically all sorts of stuff. This is the one episode of series 3 I didn't watch live as it aired because I watched Mr. Bean's Holiday at the cinema.
Maybe that's a better choice.
Yeah, and they had like a preview for this in the newspaper, and it was like, oh, the doctor finds out the Face of Beau's 4-word secret. And then some of my family was like, oh, that's going to be like You're Not Alone or something. I was like, yeah. So that kind of dampened the episode for me. It's like, oh, okay, you're right.
Oh, well,
but
you're
yeah,
a genius.
From what I remember, I have fun with it. We'll see. It could go either way probably, but I remember liking it a bit.
Yeah, I think I remember quite liking this one. I think purely for the different types of people we see. Anne Brannigan, I think, is going to be a standout. I think when I watched
the little kitten that goes, "Mama."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's the main thing. That's already.
The cat and the human woman who have kittens.
Yep. So it's going to be interesting to see how it's grown on me since I first watched it. Again, I haven't seen much of series 3 for a long time. So I'm excited to watch it purely to see if it's as okay as I remember it being. I'm kind of worried that it might drag a little bit. So as you mentioned, I can remember the kidnapping. I can remember the doctor climbing through the cars, but what's the stuff in the middle? Is that gonna drag? Is that gonna be a pain?
It's the doctor climbing through cars, and then it's Novice Haim climbing through cars. And then they teleport away, and then
and then it's fine. It's just fine.
Then everything's okay.
So we'll be interested to see how it goes. I'm interested to see the Face of Beau back for his last time. For now.
His last appearance is a big ass head.
For now. Yes.
Forever.
I mean, he could. That's what this series is. It's the Face of Beau. New series 13, Face of Beau is back.
I doubt that somehow.
That's how they get around not having John Byron. They put in the Face of Beau instead.
Face of Beau. Yeah,
same character, different man.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh Christ. Well, yeah, we'll see how Gridlock is next week when we return. With that, we'll see you then. Bye.
Bye.